My husband died 5 months ago. This morning, I saw a man who was a spitting image. I secretly followed him home and discovered a horrifying truth. My name is Maya Lin. I'm 35 years old, originally from a small fishing town in coastal Maine. My life isn't some big city success story. I was just a hardworking girl from the coast who came to Chicago for college and stayed, building a life with my own two hands and a clear head. I'm a senior accounting manager for a building materials company. It's not a glamorous job, but it's stable. People say accountants are dry. I just think I'm used to looking at numbers and keeping things in order. But when you spend so long keeping things in order, you can forget to look after your own heart. I was married to Kevin Vance for 6 years. He was 5 years older, a construction project manager who was often on site. When we first met, he was the perfect mix of mature and kind. When he visited my family in Maine, he was respectful, even lighting a memorial candle for my grandparents and praising every single dish my mother cooked. My mom told the neighbors, "My Maya is so blessed to have found such a good man." Hearing that, I told myself the same thing. A woman is lucky to have a husband who knows how to act. His family was here in Chicago. His mother, Eleanor, is 64. She's a devout Catholic who attends daily mass and prays the rosary like clockwork. She wasn't the sharp-tongued mother-in-law type. On the contrary, she was gentle, quiet, and always giving me advice. "Just keep things in order, Maya," she'd say. "A peaceful home is a blessing." She had a deep belief in divine justice. One evening, I came home late, exhausted and stressed, and she simply placed a bowl of hot soup on the table and said softly, "Anger is a poison you drink, my dear, hoping someone else will die." Her words calmed me. I grew to love my mother-in-law for her gentle spirit. But there was someone else in Kevin's family, his older sister, Diane Vance. Diane was 3 years older than Kevin. She was in real estate, well-connected, with a tongue as smooth as velvet. "I'm just worried about you," was a phrase she used like a habit. Whether that worry was genuine or something else, I would only learn after living through it. Diane had a talent for making everyone believe she was right. And her version of right always seemed to have a way of benefiting her. Our condo was in Lincoln Park, not overly luxurious, but neat and tidy, a place we'd bought together. I'm meticulous, so everything in our home had its place. Where the salt shaker went, where the sugar canister went, where the important documents were filed. I organized it all. Outsiders called me neat. I knew the truth. I was afraid of chaos because chaos so easily leads to arguments. That Saturday evening, Eleanor and Diane came over for dinner. I'd cooked a simple, well-ordered meal: a pot roast, green bean casserole, mashed potatoes, and a special Chicago-style Italian beef sandwich for Kevin, his favorite from his bachelor days. As I set the table, I said, "Kevin, go easy on that sandwich. Your blood pressure has been high lately." Kevin smiled, his gentle smile. "Yes, dear. Whatever you say." Diane sat down, glanced at the spread, and clicked her tongue in approval. "An accountant who can cook like this. This family is truly blessed." It was just a simple compliment, but it warmed me. I didn't need praise, just an acknowledgement of my effort. Eleanor was a vegetarian, so I prepared a mushroom risotto and a lentil soup just for her. She ate slowly, occasionally murmuring. A simple meal in a peaceful home is the greatest treasure. Her words always had that gentle quality that made me feel protected. But something was off about Kevin that night. He was still smiling, still serving his mother, still responding to his sister, but his eyes seemed to be a million miles away. "Are you tired?" I asked. "Is something wrong at the work site?" "No, just sleep-deprived," he answered quickly. I was about to press further when Diane cut in, her tone casual. "Kevin's project is in high gear right now. As his wife, you have to be understanding. It's a lot of pressure for a man, providing for his family." Her words were light, but they felt like a lid being placed over my question. I forced a smile. "Of course, I understand." But for some reason, a small, sharp pain pricked my heart. Halfway through dinner, Kevin's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and flipped it face down so fast it caught my eye. I'm not the type of wife who snoops on her husband's phone, but that quick, defensive movement was hard to ignore. "Who was that?" I asked casually. He laughed. "Unknown number. Probably a robocall about my car's extended warranty." Diane chimed in with a laugh of her own. "Oh, everyone gets those. Now, Eleanor, have another spoonful of risotto. The mushrooms are so good for you." Diane changed the subject as smoothly as flowing water. I looked at her and suddenly saw that she wasn't just skilled. She was skilled in a way that let her place a hand on someone's shoulder and steer them in a completely different direction. After dinner, I went to the kitchen to do the dishes. Kevin came in to help, but only stood for a moment before slipping out onto the balcony to take a call. I could hear his voice, low and clipped, as if he were afraid of being overheard. I wiped my hands and stood still for a few seconds, not to eavesdrop, but because the sudden quiet pulled me in. "Yeah, I know. Just don't call at this hour." That was all. He hung up and came back inside. Seeing me standing there, he smiled. "Finished already? Let me dry." I looked him straight in the eye. "Are you hiding something from me?" He froze for just a fraction of a second, then ran his hand through my hair. "You're overthinking things. I'm just stressed with work." His words were as light as air, but that momentary freeze felt like a stone dropping into my heart. Later that evening, Eleanor, after praying her rosary in the living room, said she wanted to leave early. I walked her to the door. She took my hand, her own thin but warm. "In a marriage, dear, even when things aren't perfect, you have to hold your tongue. A woman who wins an argument with her husband often loses a lifetime of peace." I nodded and said, "I will." But as her car pulled away, her words echoed in my head. I didn't want to win anything. I just wanted to know if I was living in a real home or just a stage where people were playing their parts. Before she left, Diane pulled me aside, speaking like a concerned sister. "Maya, if you're thinking about having kids, you should do it soon. A woman's biological clock is no joke." I froze. The topic of children was a raw wound for me. I'd had a miscarriage 2 years ago, and we hadn't been able to conceive since. Before I could say anything, she patted my shoulder. "I'm only saying this because I care about you. Don't think I'm being nosy." I nodded, but my chest felt tight. Was she concerned? Or was she reminding me of my perceived inadequacies to make me more compliant? That night, Kevin lay beside me. I turned my back to him, staring out the window. It was that time of year in Chicago when the wind had a chill and condensation clouded the glass. He pulled the blanket up over me. "Maya," he whispered, "stop overthinking. Our home is peaceful." I didn't answer. His reassurance that our home is peaceful felt like a platitude meant to soothe a child. And the more you soothe, the more suspicious you become. An old saying goes, "You can measure the depth of a river, but never the heart of a man." I didn't want to think badly of my husband, and I certainly didn't want to think badly of his family. But right then, in the silence of our bedroom, I understood one thing clearly. Some forms of peace are built by blinding others. And I was beginning to fear that kind of peace. That night was the end of May 2025. A Chicago wind was picking up, not the biting cold of winter, but a damp chill that seeped into your bones. I had just drifted off to sleep when my phone vibrated. The screen lit up with Diane's name. A call from her. At this hour, my heart skipped a beat. I answered, and before I could even say hello, a single, blunt sentence came from the other end. Diane's voice was completely different, no longer smooth, but sharp and cold. "Maya, get up. Kevin's been in an accident." I shot upright. My throat as dry as sand. "What kind of accident? Where is he?" "The hospital." "I'm already here. Get here fast." "It's bad." Just those 2 words. "It's bad," sent an icy shiver down my spine. I reached over and flicked on the bedside lamp. The space next to me was empty. The pillow was still indented, but he was gone. I froze for a second, just now remembering he'd said he had to step out for a work call earlier. He must have gone somewhere. I tried calling him. 1 call, 2, 3, each went straight to the long, drawn-out tone of an unanswered phone. I swallowed hard, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called Diane back. "Diane, what happened? Was he at a construction site? What kind of vehicle? Who told you?" Diane spoke quickly. "Don't ask so many questions. Just get here and we'll figure it out. I'm dealing with the paperwork." I didn't even have time to change properly. I threw on a sweater, a light scarf, and a pair of flats, grabbing my wallet and phone. As I reached the door, I remembered we lived on a high floor, and the elevator at night felt agonizingly slow, as if testing my patience. I jammed the button, my mind consumed by a single thought: get there as fast as possible. Down in the lobby, I called a taxi. When it arrived, I jumped in, my voice cracking. "Please, get me to the hospital, fast." I gave the driver the name of the hospital Diane had texted, my hands still trembling. The streetlights of late-night Chicago cast a sickly yellow glow. The car sped through empty streets, occasionally passing a semi-truck going the other way. The headlights swept across the windshield like a blade. I stared out the window, but saw nothing. My mind kept replaying images of Kevin from that evening, the way he'd flipped his phone over, the way he'd told me not to overthink. Then I mentally slapped myself. What was I thinking? My husband was lying in a hospital. When I arrived, the sharp, pungent smell of antiseptic hit me as soon as I stepped out of the car. The emergency room hallway was brightly lit, a chaotic symphony of footsteps, gurneys, and names being called over the intercom. It was a cold, sterling noise. I ran, my eyes darting around, searching. Diane was standing at the end of the hall, not in the posture of someone who had just rushed in, but like someone who had been waiting for a while. She wore a dark coat, her hair in a neat bun, her face grim. Seeing me, she strode forward and grabbed both my hands. "Calm down, Maya. You have to be calm." I looked at her, my questions tumbling out. "Where's Kevin? Let me see him. How is he?" Diane squeezed my hands tighter, her voice low. "He's in surgery. The doctor said it's severe trauma." I tried to push past her toward the operating room doors, but she held me back. Her grip wasn't rough. It was just a hand placed with precise force, like someone who knew how to control people in a panic. "You can't go in. They won't let you. Just stand here, and don't make a scene." I turned to look at the operating room doors. They were closed, the red light above them glowing. Two nurses bustled in and out, their faces tense. I saw a strange man sitting on a bench, his clothes dusty, his head bowed. I was about to ask who he was when Diane pulled me aside. "Sit down. I've already called Eleanor." I was startled. "Mom? She knows? How can she handle this?" "She knows. She's on her way. You need to be strong." Her command to be strong was an order. I bit my lip. In my life, I wasn't afraid of hard work or long hours, but this fear was different. This was the fear of losing someone you love. And when you face that, everything else shrinks to the size of a dust mote. About 20 minutes later, Eleanor arrived. My mother-in-law stepped out of the car, her back slightly stooped, clutching a simple cloth purse. Her face was pale, but she wasn't weeping. She looked at me, her eyes red, and gripped my hand tightly. Her hand was cold. "Diane told me about Kevin." She couldn't finish the sentence, swallowing the words. She pulled her rosary from her purse and began to run the beads through her fingers, her lips moving in silent prayer. I looked at her, and my heart ached. A woman who spent her life in quiet devotion, never imagining she'd one day be standing outside an operating room, waiting for news. Diane stood beside her, offering a tissue. "Mom, save your strength. If you collapse, Maya will fall apart completely." I heard that, and my heart felt like it was being squeezed. I didn't dare to cry out loud anymore. It felt as if my tears would cause Eleanor to faint, and if she fainted, I would be the one to blame. I suddenly felt tied by an invisible rope. A doctor emerged, his white coat pristine, a surgical mask pulled down to his chin, his forehead beaded with sweat. He spoke quickly, using a lot of medical jargon. All I could catch were fragments. "Multiple traumas. Critical condition. Currently intervening." I lunged forward. "Doctor, please, let me see my husband. I'm begging you." Before the doctor could answer, Diane stepped in front of me, her voice clear and decisive, like she was the family's official spokesperson. "Doctor, just do everything you can. Our family will sign whatever is necessary. We just ask that you be discreet for my mother's sake. She has a weak heart." The doctor gave Diane a brief nod and went back inside. I stood there, stunned, feeling completely adrift. I was the wife, but my words couldn't reach the doctor directly. They had to pass through Diane first. I turned to her, my voice choked. "Diane, I'm his wife. I need to know what's happening." Diane looked me straight in the eye. Her gaze wasn't exactly harsh, but it was incredibly firm. "Maya, listen to me. You can't help anything by panicking. Sit down and wait for the doctor." I wanted to argue, to snap back, but then I looked at my mother-in-law, her fingers flying over her rosary beads, her lips moving in desperate prayer. I swallowed my words. "Don't air your dirty laundry in public." The phrase my mother-in-law often used now felt like a weight on my chest. I told myself to be quiet, for Eleanor's sake. Time crawled by. Every time the operating room doors swung open, my heart leaped. Diane occasionally stepped away to take a call, her back to me, speaking in low tones. I couldn't hear the words, only saw her continuous nodding. "Yes, I know. I'll handle it." Near midnight, the doors opened again. A doctor came out, his face grave. I shot to my feet, my legs so weak I nearly collapsed. My mother-in-law stood up too, her rosary slipping from her grasp before she quickly picked it up. The doctor looked at the three of us and said a sentence that felt like a sledgehammer striking stone. The family needs to prepare for the worst. I don't remember how I breathed after that. I only remember Diane immediately steadying Eleanor with one hand, while her other arm pulled me close, gathering us into a tight cluster to hear the final verdict. And in that cluster, I suddenly realized that from the moment I had set foot in this hospital, every important action had been orchestrated by Diane. I was just following her lead, when I should have been the one standing closest to my husband. The thought flashed through my mind and was just as quickly swallowed by fear. Because in that moment, all I could do was pray to God, to anyone, for Kevin to live. But in that cold, sterile hallway, I felt one thing with chilling clarity. When people panic, they cling to the calmest person in the room. And if that calm person has their own agenda, the one panicking is nothing more than a puppet. I didn't know where that night would lead me. I only knew my throat was tight, and my eyes burned, but I didn't dare cry out loud. I was afraid my mother-in-law would collapse, afraid our family would shatter, afraid everything would come crashing down at once. The doctor paused after saying prepare for the worst, a deliberate beat to let the family absorb the blow. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Beside me, Eleanor's fingers moved faster over her rosary beads, her lips trembling. Diane, however, tightened her grip on her mother's shoulder, and then on me, her eyes like nails. Maya, don't you dare collapse. I wanted to scream. Let me in. I'm his wife. But my throat felt like it was being squeezed shut. A single thought dominated my mind. If I lose control, Eleanor will break down. And if she breaks down here, in front of everyone, they will see me as the one who pushed her into this tragedy. The doctor continued, his voice monotone, as if he'd delivered this line 1,000 times. We did everything we could, but the patient didn't make it. I don't remember if I cried out. I only remember my knees buckling. I grabbed onto Diane's sleeve like a drowning person clinging to the side of a boat. She held me up, but her support wasn't gentle. It was like catching a falling object to prevent it from shattering, not embracing it for comfort. I looked up at the doctor, my words escaping like a final breath. Doctor, let me see him. Just for a moment. 1 minute is all I ask. Before the doctor could reply, Diane interjected, her voice hard but still cloaked in a veil of gentleness. Doctor, the injuries were extensive, correct? Are there biohazard protocols we need to follow? My mother has a very weak heart. Please, don't let her see anything. She won't be able to bear it. The doctor glanced at my mother-in-law, who at that moment looked completely drained, her red-rimmed eyes staring into nothingness. He sighed. We don't recommend direct viewing in cases like this. It can be traumatic. I heard the word traumatic, and my heart felt like it was being torn apart. But I still tried. It's okay. I can handle it. I just need to see my husband's face one last time. Diane turned to me, her voice dropping low, each word landing like a stone. Maya, look at your mother. Do you want her to die of a heart attack right here? I turned. Eleanor was still clutching her rosary, tears falling silently onto the beads. She whispered, so softly it was almost to herself, my son. If he's gone, let him go in peace. Don't cling to him and create more suffering. Create more suffering. That phrase was like a lid slamming down on my chest. I was the daughter-in-law, the wife, standing in a public hospital, surrounded by strangers and my grieving mother-in-law. How could I react without being branded as disrespectful, as the one who caused Eleanor to collapse? I felt cornered, trapped in a room with no doors. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. I nodded, the nod of someone who had been broken. Diane immediately switched into business mode. She turned to the doctor, asking about procedures, paperwork, and timelines. Every question was smooth and precise, as if she had memorized them beforehand. I stood beside her like a bystander. A nurse brought out a clipboard of forms. Diane took them, scanned them quickly, and handed me a pen. Sign here, Maya. These are the release forms. I'll take care of them. I stared at the dense blocks of text, my vision blurred. I tried to read the first few lines, but the words danced before my eyes. My mind was consumed by one thought. My husband is lying in there, and I'm not allowed to see him. What rights do I even have left? I signed. My signature was shaky, distorted. After I signed, Diane took the papers, folded them neatly, and put them in her purse. Her movements were quick, decisive, without a hint of hesitation. I turned to her, my voice lost. Diane. Where's Kevin now? Where's he? Diane looked at me directly. They're processing things. Don't go in there. Do you want his mother to see that? Do you want her to live with that image for the rest of her life? Again, his mother. Again, that invisible rope binding me. I walked over to Eleanor, knelt, and took her hands. They were as cold as ice. She looked at me, her eyes swollen, and said one thing very slowly. I'm so sorry, my dear. Her words twisted my heart. What was she sorry for? For not being able to protect her son? Or for not being able to protect me? I didn't know. I only knew that her pain was real, and that in the midst of that real pain, someone else was calmly orchestrating everything. About an hour later, a gurney was wheeled down the hall, a stark white sheet covering it completely. On pure instinct, I lunged forward. Please, please, just let me see for a second. Before I could even touch it, Diane was in front of me. She didn't grab me or pull me back. She simply stood in my way. She spoke quietly, but her voice had lost all its softness. Maya, that's enough. Do you want to cause a scene here? I froze. People were watching. Nurses, doctors, my mother-in-law. I felt like I was on display. If I pushed past her, I would be the villain in everyone's eyes. I stepped back. The gurney rolled past. The white sheet rolled past. And I understood. In that moment, I had lost the right to see the face of the man I called my husband. Late that night, Diane arranged for a car to take Eleanor home first. My mother-in-law leaned on my shoulder, her breathing shallow, still murmuring her prayers. I helped her into the car and told the driver to go slowly. As the car disappeared, I turned back. Diane was still standing at the entrance, her phone wedged between her ear and shoulder, speaking in short, clipped sentences. Yes, do it exactly as I said. I'll hold on to the paperwork. I stood a few feet away. I couldn't hear everything, but the word paperwork sent a sharp pang through my chest, like something had just been taken from me before I even realized I had it. That night, I stayed with Diane to finish the rest of the procedures. I was so exhausted, my mind was a blank slate. They handed us papers. Diane gave a brief explanation, and I signed. I signed like a machine, while my heart felt like cold ash. People say you only see a person's true character in a crisis. At that moment, I wasn't clear-headed enough to understand. I only knew one thing. On the night my husband died, I had been taught to be good, to be quiet, and to not create more suffering. But some suffering isn't created by the living. Sometimes, it's a burden someone else places on your head, telling you to bow down and bear it. The next morning, I woke up in our Lincoln Park condo feeling like a part of my body had been amputated. On the dining table, the glass Kevin had used the night before was still there. The ashtray on the balcony still held a half-smoked cigarette. Everything was the same, except the person was gone. The feeling wasn't a loud crash, but a slow, persistent ache, like a paper cut that stings relentlessly. Diane called me very early. Her voice was hoarse but still efficient. Maya, get dressed in black. I'll pick you up to go to the funeral home. Eleanor is already there. I asked a question that even I knew was foolish. Where's Kevin now, Diane? She answered without missing a beat. He's been moved to the mortuary. Don't ask any more questions. I've taken care of everything. I've taken care of everything. The phrase was repeated like a stamp on every event. I nodded and got dressed. As I fumbled with the first button on my blouse, my hand shook so much I couldn't fasten it. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at my pale face, and for the first time in my life, I realized some shocks can age a person overnight. The funeral home was more crowded than I expected. People came not just out of love, but out of obligation. Kevin's colleagues, business partners, distant relatives, they filled the hallway. The sound of the organ music was chilling. The scent of incense, lilies, and carnations mingled into a thick, numbing fragrance. I walked in, my legs feeling like jelly. Eleanor was sitting in the front row, her rosary still in her hands. She looked at me, her eyes red, but she kept her voice steady. You're here, dear. She took my hand and squeezed it, as if afraid I too might dissolve into the incense smoke. Diane was different. She stood at the reception table, directing people where to place floral wreaths, who should sign the guest book, where to sit. Everything moved to the rhythm of her commands. To every guest, she offered a greeting, an introduction, and a story about Kevin. Her voice pitched with just the right amount of grief and dignity. People nodded at her in admiration. His sister is so capable. I stood nearby, hearing them praise her. while my own grief felt like nothing more than the backdrop for her performance. I was placed in a chair next to the portrait. In the photo, Kevin was smiling his gentle smile, his eyes seemingly looking right at me. I wanted to reach out and touch the picture, but pulled my hand back, afraid I would burst into tears like a child. And if I cried, people would flock to comfort me with generic platitudes, and a few minutes later, they would be shaking Diane's hand and praising her strength. A relative, probably from the family's side, about Eleanor's age, leaned in close to my ear. "You have to be strong, dear. In life, we all have our crosses to bear. You just have to carry what's given to you." I nodded, my lips murmuring a yes, but inside I felt a bitter taste. What cross? Or do people just give fate a gentler name to make it easier to swallow? The crowd grew. People stood in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. I caught snippets of conversation. Kevin was such a good guy. It's a shame. Poor Maya. So young and already a widow. Diane is holding this family together. They're lucky to have her. Every comment that reached my ears was like a dash of salt on my raw skin. I wasn't jealous of the praise. I just wondered why everyone so easily accepted things as they were, as if a person's disappearance could be neatly filed away with a few documents and a portrait. Around noon, I pulled Diane aside, trying to keep my voice steady. "Diane, I'm begging you. Let me see him. Just once. I won't make a scene. I just want to say goodbye." Diane's eyes darkened for a moment. Then she sighed, playing the part of the compassionate older sister. "Maya, I understand, but why would you want to see him like that? Only to be haunted for the rest of your life. If you see him, will you ever find peace? Will Eleanor ever find peace?" I was speechless. Once again, she used Eleanor as a shield, a blanket to smother my words. I glanced over at Eleanor. She was sitting quietly, staring at the floor, the rosary beads slipping through her fingers. She looked so small and fragile in that large, noisy room. I couldn't bear to add to her pain. "Fine," was all I could manage. Diane patted my shoulder. "Good girl. Listen to me. Don't air your dirty laundry in public. You understand, right? We can't have people saying this family has no dignity." I understood, but this dignity felt like a sharp edge, cutting into my heart until it bled. In the afternoon, the family held a small reception at the funeral home. I couldn't swallow a single bite of food. It felt like sand in my mouth. Diane continued to bustle about, her constant refrain being, "I'll take care of it, I'll arrange it." At one point, as I sat there listlessly, she leaned in and whispered, "Don't just sit there looking lost. People are watching. You're his wife. You need to maintain a proper image for Kevin's sake." I almost laughed out loud. Maintain an image for Kevin or for this family? I wanted to ask, but I kept my lips sealed. Some questions, if asked at the wrong time, can turn you into the villain in everyone's eyes. I was never good at public confrontations, and even worse at acting. By evening, as the crowd thinned, I found myself staring at the portrait again. His eyes in the photo were still gentle, but my heart was cold. I thought of the old saying, life is like a fleeting shadow. But why did this shadow pass so quickly? So fast I didn't even have time to call its name. While I was sitting there, a middle-aged man, probably one of Kevin's colleagues from a construction site, came up to light a stick of incense. He then turned to me. "Ma'am," Kevin was a stand-up guy. "Just the other day, he called me to discuss a materials order. I can't believe." He choked up. "Please, take care of yourself." I nodded my thanks, but that detail, "just the other day," he called, made me pause. Just the other day. Kevin was still calling about work supplies. So why didn't I know where he was going the night it happened? I was about to ask more when Diane stepped in, cutting off the conversation with a sad but polite smile. "Thank you for your kindness. Maya is still in shock. If you have any business matters, please feel free to discuss them with me." I looked at her, the way she positioned herself in front of our conversation, and I felt like I was being pushed away from any information related to my own husband. I was the wife, but everyone was talking to his sister. I was the one grieving, but everyone was praising her for her management. That night, as I helped Eleanor into the car to go home and rest, she gripped my hand and whispered, "You've been wronged, my dear. My heart goes out to you." Her eyes were red, her voice hoarse. I wanted to say it was okay, but my throat was too tight. Back at the condo, I collapsed onto the living room floor. The silence was so profound, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I looked around. Everything was still in the exact place I had arranged it, but I suddenly felt like a guest in my own life. I didn't cry anymore. My tears had run dry, leaving only a heavy weight in my chest. I couldn't name what it was: suspicion, a feeling of being controlled, or the deep humiliation of not being allowed to be a wife in the truest sense. I only knew that since Kevin's death, I had been placed in a chair, the chair of a very good, obedient widow. And I had never wanted to be good in a way that someone else had arranged for me. I sat on the living room floor until dawn, my back cold, my hands numb, my head throbbing with a rhythmic pain. I heard the sparse traffic outside, and then my phone rang again. It was Diane. "Maya, are you awake? Get ready. They've scheduled the service early to make sure everything is on time." I jolted, dazed. "Service? What service, Diane?" "The cremation. We can't delay it. The weather is unpredictable these days. You understand." I shot up, my heart sinking. I couldn't remember agreeing to a cremation. Or had I just nodded numbly when my mind was a blank? My voice was raspy. "Why so soon? Can't we wait a little? I want—" Diane cut me off, her voice still gentle but with an unyielding edge. "Maya, listen to me. Don't cling. The departed must be allowed to rest in peace. Eleanor prayed all night. Her eyes are completely swollen. If you drag this out, she won't be able to take it." Eleanor again. The mention of her name was enough to silence me. I stood up and got dressed in a daze. The black blouse from yesterday was still draped over a chair. I put it on, and it felt as heavy as lead. At the funeral home, the atmosphere was even heavier than the day before. The smell of incense, wilting lilies, and mourning clothes blended into a suffocating haze. My mother-in-law had arrived early and was sitting in a corner, her eyes red and listless, like someone who hadn't slept at all. Seeing me, she took my hand, which trembled slightly. "Have you eaten anything, dear?" I shook my head. She sighed. "I'll make you some soup when we get home. Don't let yourself collapse." Diane appeared, a folder of papers in her hand. She nodded at everyone she passed, her lips forming a constant stream of "thank you," "I'm sorry," and "please help," so skillfully that people automatically did as she asked. She leaned in close to me. "I've arranged everything. You just need to sign in a few places." I looked at the papers, my eyes swimming. "Sign what?" "Formalities. Just administrative stuff. You sign so they can proceed. I'll be here to oversee everything. Don't worry." I took the pen, my hand cold. The tip of the pen on the paper felt rough. I wanted to ask more, but Diane had already turned to speak with a staff member. Her voice was low, quick, and precise. I overheard a fragment. "Yes. The family wants to keep it brief to stay on schedule." The words "keep it brief" landed in my ear like the clang of metal. I signed. When I was done, Diane took the papers, straightened them, and clipped them into the folder. Her movements were as neat as a seasoned office manager's, while I was signing off on the final farewell to a life. When it was time, they wheeled out the casket, a simple wooden box. On pure instinct, I stepped forward, my heart pounding. I wanted to open it, to see Kevin's face. Even for a second, I thought, in this world, a husband and wife should at least have one last look, so their hearts don't get torn to shreds. I had just reached out my hand when Diane blocked my path. She didn't hold me, didn't pull me back. She just stood in the precise spot that made my hand grasp at empty air. "Maya, don't." I looked at her, my eyes burning. "Diane, please. Just a moment. I won't make a scene." Diane leaned in close, her voice a low, hard whisper. "Do you want Eleanor to see this? Do you want her to collapse right here? Maya, listen to me. If you truly care for the departed, let them rest in peace." I turned. My mother-in-law was standing behind us, her hands clasped in prayer, her lips moving. She wasn't looking at the casket. She had turned her face away, as if afraid her own eyes would shatter. I was caught between them, between the needs of my heart and the crushing weight of duty. I clenched my jaw and stepped back. The gurney rolled away, the sound of its wheels on the tiled floor, a soft, grinding noise that seemed to echo endlessly in my ears. I walked behind it, feeling like I was following the shadow of the man I loved, unable to touch, unable to see. The crematorium was hot and enclosed. An attendant guided the family to a waiting area, reciting procedural phrases that sounded like a checklist. I looked around. Diane was still the one in charge, conferring with the staff, nodding continuously. I stood beside her, my eyes fixed on the heavy metal door. The door that, once closed, would also lock away my last chance. I asked, my voice barely a whisper, Can I stand a little closer?" Before the attendant could answer, Diane replied for him. That's not necessary. You can stand here. You're not well. Don't push yourself. A bitter smile formed in my heart. Was I unwell, or had I been taught to be unwell? I looked down at my shoes. Yesterday, I was a wife. Today, I was someone who was permitted to be present but not permitted to have rights. When the machinery inside started whirring, I couldn't hear it clearly, only felt a faint vibration in the air. My legs went weak. I wanted to run out, yet I wanted to rush in. I stood frozen like a block of wood. My mother-in-law suddenly sighed, her voice raspy. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. All is fleeting. Then she turned to me, tears streaming down her face, her voice pleading. Don't think about it anymore, dear. Don't cling to it. I nodded, but in my heart, I couldn't let go. How could I, when I hadn't even had a chance to hold on? They told me not to cling, but I had never been allowed to touch what I was supposed to be clinging to. When it was over, they presented the family with an urn. It was smaller than I had imagined, so small it was shocking. A tall, strong man who had once walked into my home, who had smiled at me, was now contained in a cold, small box. I reached out to take it, but Diane was faster. She took it first, clutching it to her chest like a precious treasure. Let me hold it, she said. Your hands are shaking. I watched her hold the urn, and a strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't jealousy or suspicion, just a profound sense of loss. It was as if even my husband's ashes were not mine to hold first. On the way home with Eleanor, I sat in the back, staring out the window. The streets were busy, cars were moving, people were laughing and talking, shops were open. The world was spinning as usual, while I felt like I was stuck in a place no one could see. I thought of the saying, life is but a candle in the wind, but why was this wind so cruel? Back at the condo, I went into our bedroom and opened the closet, looking for the flannel shirt Kevin used to wear. I held it to my chest, took a deep breath, and caught a faint, strange scent. It wasn't the laundry detergent I used. It was very subtle, but it made me freeze. I stood there, staring at the shirt as if it were a clue. I didn't say anything to anyone. I couldn't scream. I just put the shirt down, washed my face, and sat at the dining table where, just a few nights ago, I had told him to go easy on the Italian beef. The condo was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock. I watched the hands move. Time was still passing, but my heart felt like it had been neatly tidied up, folded into a corner, and told to be good and accepted. People always say, don't air your dirty laundry in public. I had tried to maintain that dignity for his family, for his mother, for the very idea of our marriage. But on the day I said my final goodbye, I began to understand that some lines of dignity are drawn to make it easier for others to control you. And when they said, to stay on schedule, sometimes what gets left behind isn't time, but a wife's right to grieve properly. I lost track of the days. After the cremation, all I remembered was waking up each morning with a dry throat, swollen eyes, and a head that felt like it was full of rocks. I still went to work, signed documents, and sat in front of my computer. My hands moved, but my mind was elsewhere, floating in a gray cloud. 3 days later, Diane called to arrange a visit to the church. She said Eleanor wanted to place the urn in a columbarium niche, to do things properly. You should come, Maya, she said, to fulfill your role as his wife. I heard the words fulfill your role, and flinched. Since Kevin's death, my role had felt like a costume someone else had dressed me in, leading me wherever they pleased. On Sunday morning, the Chicago sky was overcast. I wore dark clothes and a baseball cap to avoid people looking at my face. The church was on a quiet street. As I stepped inside, the scent of incense and lilies, and the steady chime of a bell filled the air. My mother-in-law was standing before a statue of the Virgin Mary, her hands clasped, her lips moving in prayer. She had lost weight, her eyes were sunken, but she tried to maintain the serene composure of a devout woman. Seeing me, she took my hand and said softly, "Thank you for coming with me. We need to find a peaceful place for Kevin. If the departed are not at peace, the living cannot be either." "Yes, Eleanor," I said, my throat tight. I hadn't even found peace in my grief, and already I had to worry about finding a place of peace for him. Diane led the way, speaking with a nun and the director of the mausoleum. I stood by, looking at the rows of niches, neatly arranged like filing cabinets. Each niche had a small plaque with a name, date of birth, and date of death. It was silent, orderly, clean. I suddenly thought that in the end, A person's life is just filed away in a box, like a piece of paper. The thought made me shudder. The director spoke quietly with Diane for a few moments. She nodded continuously, then turned to Eleanor and me, her voice appropriately solemn. This section is very nice. Good light. It's considered a blessing to be placed here. The price is $28,000. I thought I had misheard. I blinked. How much did you say? Diane looked at me as if she had prepared her arguments in advance. 28,000. Don't be shocked, Maya. In Chicago these days, everything costs a fortune. This is the last thing we can do for Kevin. We have to do it right. I looked at my mother-in-law. She sighed, her voice weak but firm. I don't mind the money, dear. We can't take it with us. Only our good deeds follow us. On any other day, I would have found her words gentle. But that day, they felt like a hammer striking my weakest point. I had just lost my husband. I was now a widow, and I still had to be the dutiful daughter-in-law. How could I say no? If I refused, they would call me cheap. If I refused, my mother-in-law would be hurt. If I refused, Diane had 100 ways to spin the story to make me look like I didn't love my husband. I swallowed hard. That's a lot of money. I don't have it all right now. Diane smiled softly and placed a hand on my wrist, her tone placating. I know, but think about it. Kevin loved you. He worked hard for you. Now, we're giving him a peaceful resting place. It will bring you peace of mind later on. I'll talk to them. Maybe they'll let us pay in 2 installments. I looked at her. Her mouth said it was for me, but her hand was controlling the situation. 2 installments still meant the full amount. I didn't know whether to be angry or to laugh, because at that moment, even the air I was breathing felt like it required permission. Eleanor suddenly gripped my hand tighter, her eyes welling with tears. Maya, please, don't let people say this family was stingy with its own son. Kevin is. He's gone. Her plea broke my heart. She wasn't wrong. She was just a mother grieving for her son, trying to protect her family's dignity. But her grief left me with no way out. I nodded. A nod that, looking back, felt like I was signing away my future. It wasn't just a debt of money. It was a debt of silence. Diane took me to the office to handle the paperwork. They handed me a stack of documents. She stood close, pointing to the signature lines. Here and here. Sign here. The words blurred before my eyes. All I could make out were long paragraphs about niche fees, maintenance fees, and endowment care funds. It all sounded very proper, very respectful. I wanted to read it carefully, but Diane whispered, sign quickly. They need to close out for the day. I signed. My hand was steadier this time than at the hospital, because I was too exhausted to even shake. I transferred the money right there. The number on the screen, $28,000, was a cold, stark figure. I hit confirm, and it felt like I was pressing a button that locked a door on my life. Afterward, Diane spoke with the director again. I stood nearby but couldn't hear, only saw her nodding and smiling politely. Then she came back to me. It's all set. I'll hold on to the papers for you. It's easy to misplace things when you're upset. I paused. Can I have a copy? At least the receipt. Diane looked at me, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face before she quickly smoothed it over. You're overwhelmed right now. Why add more things to worry about? I'll keep them safe for you. I'm Kevin's sister. Why would I trick you? Besides, your mother wants everything to be handled neatly. Eleanor, hearing the word neatly, nodded. That's right, dear. Keep things in order. We don't want to lose anything and create more problems. More problems. The phrase was like a magic spell. Hearing it, I fell silent. Leaving the church, Diane drove Eleanor back to her house in Oak Park. I went with them because Eleanor had asked me to stay for a simple meal. The meal was just lentil soup, pan-fried tofu, and steamed vegetables with soy sauce, simple and clean. Eleanor served me a piece of tofu. Eat, dear. You're too thin. I lifted the food to my mouth but tasted nothing. My mind was still flashing with the number $28,000 and the phrase, I'll hold on to the papers for you. I'm not a greedy person, but I am meticulous. When I spend money, I need to know where it's going. But here, I was paying with trust, and trust doesn't come with a receipt. After dinner, Diane poured tea, her tone casual. Maya, don't worry. Right now, you just need to focus on lighting memorial candles and observing the proper dates. I'll take care of all the paperwork. I looked up at her. Her smile was the same, just friendly enough, just caring enough. But for some reason, it felt like a gag. I replied softly, yes, I'll listen to you. Outside, The wind rustled the leaves of the trees. Eleanor was praying her rosary again. Diane was on her phone, texting. I sat between these two women, one so gentle she believed unquestioningly in her faith. The other so skilled, she used that faith as a tool. As for me, I felt like a small, covered candle, burning faintly where no one could see. People say to love others as you love yourself. But that day, I learned a different lesson. Sometimes, people force you to love in the way they choose, so you don't have time to ask questions, to hold on, or to even see yourself clearly. I finished the meal and asked to be excused. On the drive back to Lincoln Park, I didn't cry. I just felt empty. So empty that the sounds of the city traffic felt distant, like echoes from another life. And for the first time, in that emptiness, I felt a flicker of fear. The fear that one day, even my own grief would be held from me by someone else, just like those papers. After placing the urn in the columbarium, I thought I would feel lighter, as Diane had said. But I didn't feel lighter, only hollow, like a house that had been cleared out. They say grief is when the living are at their weakest. It's true. Weak, not because you can't do things, but because you can no longer trust anything. I continued to go to work. In the morning, I'd arrive at the office in a pressed blouse, sit at my desk, open spreadsheets, approve invoices, and sign documents. The numbers still flowed. The reports were still due. Sometimes a coworker would look at me and whisper, "Hang in there, Maya." I would just nod, managing a smile that felt like it belonged to someone else. In the evenings, I would light a candle on the mantelpiece, change the water in the small vase of flowers, and say a prayer. I did it out of habit, and as a way to keep the condo from feeling completely empty. The space was large, and at night, it felt even larger. The quiet hum of the air conditioner sounded like a long sigh. I ate dinner alone, sometimes just a bowl of soup, sometimes a microwave meal. I ate to survive, not because I enjoyed it. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, would visit occasionally. She never said much, just brought me some vegetarian food, some fruit, or a jar of homemade jam. She always said the same thing: you have to take care of yourself. I loved her for it. Her kindness was real, her pain was real. And because of that reality, I was even more afraid of causing her more pain. Then there was Diane. She was like a clock. Every few days, she would call, and every call started the same way. "Maya, how are you eating? Don't overthink things." Then, after a few pleasantries, she would shift to reminders. "Remember to light a candle on the first of the month. Remember to go to church for the memorial mass. Remember to pray for his soul." She spoke as if she were worried about me, but her voice carried a strange pressure, as if my forgetting a single prayer would make me a terrible wife. One day, I had just gotten home, not even having changed out of my work clothes when my phone rang. "Maya," Diane said, "I'm reminding you, don't listen to gossip. When someone dies, it's over. You just need to live your life with dignity." I was silent for a few seconds, then asked very gently, "Diane, did Kevin leave behind any important papers or account books? Have you seen anything?" There was a pause on the other end. Just a beat, but it was enough to know I'd hit a nerve. Then she laughed it off. "Why are you asking? It's not proper to talk about paperwork during a time of mourning. I have everything. I'll give it to you when the time is right. But I just want to know." Diane cut me off. "Maya, you're overthinking again. Listen to me. Don't torture yourself. I'm handling everything. You just worry about Eleanor and yourself. Don't overthink." Coming from her, it sounded like a comforting phrase. But I had heard it so many times it had become a command. A command to be silent, to trust, to sit in the chair of the good, obedient widow. The second month, she started asking strange questions. "Maya, the joint savings account passbook. You're keeping it in a safe place, right?" I froze. "What does the savings account have to do with anything?" She laughed. "Oh, I'm just asking. In case we need to do something later, it's good to know where things are. You're on your own now. You have to be practical." On your own now sounded like sympathy, but the way she said it felt like she was taking inventory. The third month, she asked, "The condo in Lincoln Park. It's in both your names, right? Do you have all the deeds?" I became wary but answered vaguely, "Yes, I have them filed away where I keep things." She made a soft hum sound and then immediately changed the subject, reminding me to eat and sleep well. That hum sent a chill down my spine. As an accountant, I knew that sound could be a check mark, a note that a piece of information had been confirmed. One day at lunch, I was eating at my desk when a close colleague pulled up a chair. She whispered, "Maya, I don't want to pry, but have you looked at Kevin's life insurance policy?" I was so startled, my chopsticks froze midair. Life insurance? I'm not sure. I think Diane has all of that. She sighed. I'm just mentioning it. As women, we grieve, but we have to be clear about the paperwork. It's not about being greedy. It's about your rights. I heard the word rights, and my heart ached. Since Kevin's death, I had been living by the word should. I should be good. I should be quiet. I should maintain appearances. My rights, it seemed, had been filed away somewhere, with all that other paperwork. That evening, it started to rain. Not a downpour like back in Maine, but a cold, steady Chicago drizzle. I stood on the balcony, watching the streetlights reflect in the puddles below. Suddenly, I heard the familiar roar of a motorcycle starting up in the parking garage, a sound so familiar it made my heart pound. For a split second, I thought Kevin was home. I thought he was about to open the door, smile, and say, "I'm here." But the door remained shut. There was only the sound of the rain and the distant hum of the elevator. I laughed at myself, a laugh that brought tears to my eyes. I quickly wiped them away, afraid that if I cried out loud, the entire condo would collapse around me. In that moment, I knew I couldn't continue to live like this, being led by others. If I did, I would wither away like a dying ember. I started doing something small, something that would later save me. I took out a thin, plain notebook and began to log every one of Diane's calls. No emotions, just the date, time, key phrases, and main topics. The day she reminded me about a memorial. The day she asked about a document. The time she told me not to overthink. I wrote it all down. When I was done, I hid the notebook at the very bottom of a drawer, a place no one would look. I also changed how I answered her calls. Before, I would ask questions and try to explain myself. Now, I just said, "Yes, I understand." I practiced making my voice a little weaker, a little sadder, to fit the role of the widow Diane wanted me to be. I wasn't being dramatic. I was just being less honest. Once, she called and asked, "Maya, have you gone to church for the service yet?" I replied, "I was planning to go this weekend." "Go sooner," she said. "We don't want people to say this family is neglectful." I agreed immediately, but in my head, a different question formed. Who are people, and why do they have the right to judge me? Or are people just a whip used to make me run in the direction they want? Occasionally, Eleanor would also remind me, in her gentle way, "Don't think too much, dear. It only creates more suffering." I never blamed her. She was just clinging to her faith to survive the loss of her son. I loved her, and I was certain that if something was wrong, the fault did not lie with her. From the 4th month on, I began to feel the gaps more acutely, as if there were corners of this life that someone was intentionally keeping me from entering. Every time I asked about paperwork, Diane would say, "I have it." Every time I said I wanted to handle something related to Kevin myself, she would say, "Let me do it." She once said something that sounded very practical. If you start questioning things, Kevin's soul won't be at rest. There's an old saying, a guilty conscience needs no accuser. I wasn't ready to draw conclusions yet. I only knew that every time I mentioned the word paperwork, Diane's voice would falter. And every time it faltered, my own mind became a little clearer. 6 months passed like that. I lived by habit, breathed through my memories, and practiced silence as a form of self-defense. I no longer asked questions expecting an answer. I started listening to figure out what people were hiding. Some nights, after lighting a candle, I would sit on the sofa and watch the flame flicker, telling myself something very practical. Just because I'm gentle doesn't mean I'm blind. I didn't tell anyone, not even Eleanor. I just kept that thought in my chest like a small, hot coal. A small coal, but one that, with the right wind, would eventually burst into flame. In early September 2025, the oppressive Chicago heat had started to break, but the afternoon sun still cast a hazy yellow light on the pavement. I left work a little early, stopping at the grocery store to buy things for Kevin's 6-month memorial, just as Diane had instructed. I wasn't thinking about anything profound, just a simple list. Candles, white lilies, some fruit, a cake, and a few other items Eleanor had said were proper for a memorial. The store was bright, with soft music playing. People pushed carts, chose their groceries, laughed and talked. It was so peaceful it made me feel out of place. I walked past the produce, the meat counter, the spice aisle, holding a pack of candles, my heart as empty as a clean bowl. I was standing in front of the fruit display when I caught a familiar scent giardiniera, the spicy pickled vegetable mix. I froze. Kevin had loved giardiniera on his Italian beef sandwiches, but after his blood pressure diagnosis, I'd forbidden it. He'd laughed and said, "Whatever the wife says, I'll listen. Don't want you nagging me to death." The words popped into my head, as clear as if someone had whispered them behind me. I turned toward the condiment aisle. Among the neatly arranged jars, I saw a man in a faded t-shirt, dark shorts, and old sandals. He was holding a jar of giardiniera, squinting at the label under the bright fluorescent lights. The slight stoop of his shoulders, the way he narrowed his eyes to read small print, it was exactly like Kevin. So much like him that I felt a sharp, painful jolt in my chest, as if someone had yanked on my heartstrings. I stood rooted to the spot for a few seconds. My mind wasn't thinking about logic. It was pure, raw instinct screaming, asterisk, that's my husband, asterisk. I abandoned my shopping cart and walked toward him. Each step felt like walking on cotton, yet my feet were as heavy as lead. I reached out and grabbed his wrist. My hand was cold, but my grip was surprisingly strong. "Kevin." The man whipped around. The moment his eyes met mine, I saw a flash of pure panic, as quick as a spark. Then, instantly, his face went blank. He pulled his arm away, affecting a confused, slightly foreign accent. "Ma'am, you've got the wrong person. My name is Lou. I'm just visiting from out of town." I didn't answer. I stared at the corner of his left eye. There was a faint, crescent-shaped scar there. A scar from years ago when he'd fallen off his skateboard. I had been the one to clean the cut, muttering, "You act like such a kid." He just grinned and said, "Good thing my wife's my personal nurse." I glanced down at his left hand. The tip of his pinky finger was missing. I remembered him telling me about the accident at a construction site, making light of it so I wouldn't worry. That was not a mark you could easily hide. The man started to look away, sweat beading on his temples despite the store's air conditioning. He forced a smile. "Really? Ma'am? You've made a mistake. People look alike, you know." I still didn't speak. I just tightened my grip on his wrist a little. My own voice sounding so calm it scared me. "Stop acting. What are you afraid of?" A second later, he violently wrenched his arm free. The jar of giardiniera fell back onto the shelf with a clatter. He took a step back, his eyes darting around for an escape route. Then he turned and ran. Several people stared. A store employee started to walk over. But I remained still. I didn't scream. I didn't faint. I didn't cry. It was strange. I felt as if something inside me had just shut down, locking away all soft emotions. I followed him, weaving past the bakery section, dodging shoppers, and heading straight for the exit. I moved quickly, but without panic. I knew if I caused a scene, he would vanish like smoke. I got to the parking lot just in time to see him jump onto an old, beat-up motorcycle. It sputtered to life, and he sped out onto the street. Without hesitating, I hailed a taxi, my voice so sharp the driver jumped. "Sir, follow that motorcycle up ahead. Please, just keep a safe distance." The taxi pulled out, and I sat in the back, my hands resting on my lap, my palms slick with sweat. The motorcycle crossed a bridge, the wind whipping against the windows. Chicago was still bustling and loud, but in my mind, there was only a straight line connecting my heart to the back of that man. He wasn't driving recklessly, more like someone who was afraid of being followed but didn't dare to speed. The bike turned towards Cicero, the streets narrowing, the houses packed tightly together, power lines crisscrossing overhead like a spider's web. I told the driver to slow down and stop a block away. I got out and hid behind a large tree, my heart pounding, but my mind clearer than it had ever been. The door of a small, one-story house with a tin roof opened, and the man went inside. A few seconds later, a weary-looking woman came out and took a plastic grocery bag from his hand, saying something I couldn't hear. Then, from inside the house, two small children burst out like birds from a cage. "Daddy's home! Daddy's home!" I froze, a ringing in my ears. I thought I had misheard, but no. A little boy hugged the man's leg tightly, while a little girl jumped up and down laughing. The man bent down, picked one up, and ruffled the other's hair. His smile was so natural it made me want to be sick. "Daddy." Not uncle, not mister, not grandpa. Daddy. I clutched the tree trunk to keep from falling. In that instant, the memorial on my mantelpiece in Lincoln Park flashed through my mind. The portrait of Kevin, still smiling gently. The candles I had lit for 6 months. The $28,000 columbarium niche I had paid for. It all felt like a sick, twisted joke. I wanted to rush out, grab him by the collar, and demand to know if his performance was over. But a part of me held back, cold and rational. Asterisk. If you make a scene, you'll lose him. All you'll have is a screaming match and humiliation. The truth will slip away. Asterisk. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo. It wasn't a clear shot of his face, but it was enough. Enough to see him holding his child. Enough to see the woman standing in the doorway. Enough to prove that this small house was real. As I stood there, a thought occurred to me. If you are reading this story, and you find it compelling, please take a moment to leave a like and a comment. Your support gives us the motivation to continue. And try to put yourself in my shoes. What would you do if you saw the man you thought was dead, holding a child who called him daddy? Leave a comment below. Because as this story unfolds, the truth will reveal something that will leave many of you stunned. I turned and walked out of the alley, my feet feeling like they were stuck in mud. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. I just felt a coldness spread from the back of my neck down my spine. A cold like touching the edge of a deep, dark well. When I got home, I locked the door and leaned against it. The condo was still clean, still orderly. But in my eyes, it now looked like an empty stage. I walked straight to Kevin's home office, a room I had rarely entered, out of respect for his space. I stood in front of the safe, my hand on the combination dial. I took a slow, deep breath. People say a guilty conscience needs no accuser. Today, I had seen that guilt with my own eyes. And from today on, I understood one thing. When the truth shows its face, even the gentlest heart will turn to stone to avoid being led astray again. I stood before the safe for a long time, not because I had forgotten the combination, but because my hands were shaking in a new way. It was the trembling of someone who had just seen the truth and was trying not to let it consume her. The safe was built into a cabinet. Inside were mostly documents. The condo deed, savings bonds, a few contracts. Kevin used to tell me, "You hold on to these. You're more careful than I am." I had believed it was a sign of trust. Now, I realize that sometimes people give you the key not so you can open the lock, but so you'll think you're in control. I turned the dial. The dry click echoed in the silent room. The door swung open, releasing the cold scent of old paper and metal. I took everything out, one by one, not rushing. I laid them out on his desk in neat piles. House papers, car titles, work files, insurance policies. I looked at the black and white pages and felt a sting in my eyes, because a person's life could be so neatly processed. My phone still held the blurry photo from the alley. I zoomed in, looking at the man holding the child. That hand, that profile. It was so familiar I wanted to smash the screen to stop looking. But I didn't. I told myself I had to look, to see it clearly, because some things can only save you when they are clear. I opened an old photo album. Wedding pictures, photos from a beach vacation, a trip to my hometown in Maine. I chose a few close-ups of Kevin's face, zooming in on the scar by his left eye, on his hand. The scar, the missing fingertip, it all matched. There was no room for the people look-alike excuse. I sat down, my back against the chair, feeling like I was leaning on a block of ice. Details I had previously dismissed now flooded my mind. At the hospital, Diane was already there, as if she knew I was coming. When the doctor delivered the news, she wasn't as distraught as I would have expected. She just said, "Sign this. Don't make a scene. Think of your mother." The funeral was rushed, the cremation was rushed, and she kept all the original documents. The $28,000 columbarium niche, where she stood in front of me, speaking privately with the director before handing me the papers to sign. It was all like a railroad track, and I had been pushed onto a cart, forced to follow its path. I stood up and pulled open a desk drawer. Inside were a few notebooks, some pens, a stack of business cards, and a thick envelope tucked underneath. It had no name on it, but the edges were creased, as if it had been stuffed in a pocket many times. I opened it. Inside were a few faded photocopies, a bank appointment slip, a copy of some contract, and a small piece of paper with a note scrawled in pen, * Cicero deal is set. Don't call after 9. Asterisk. The handwriting wasn't mine, and it didn't look much like Kevin's, but it made the back of my neck go cold. Cicero was like a nail being hammered home. I didn't jump to conclusions. I just took a picture of the note and saved it in a separate folder, simply labeled evidence. I did one more thing. I opened my laptop and created a new file. I titled it Timeline. I logged the dates and times from memory and from my phone's records. The day Diane called at midnight. The day of the viewing. The day of the cremation. The day I transferred the $28,000. And today, the day I saw a dead man holding his child. I didn't record my feelings, only the facts. An accountant's habit. Numbers are harder to lie with than tears. When I was done, I finally allowed myself to breathe deeply. My chest ached, as if it were in a vise. But this pain was different from collapse. This pain was making me sharp. I sat back at the desk and looked around Kevin's office. Everything was still in its place. Before, I had seen it as order. Now, I saw it as a setup. On the bookshelf was a black-bound ledger, its corners worn. I pulled it out and flipped through. It wasn't a diary. Just work notes, lists of materials, some figures. Halfway through, I found a page with names written on it. Asterisk Lana, Bona, milk money, school fees. Asterisk. The notes were brief, written by someone trying not to forget. I stared at the names, my throat tightening. So, this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a whole other life, existing in parallel to mine, quiet and steady, while I was lighting candles for a fake death. Something inside me broke then, not with a crash, but a silent shatter. I remembered my mother in Maine always saying, "A woman's love has to have boundaries. A blind love will only drown you." I had loved blindly. I had listened to platitudes and gagged myself with them. I picked up my phone and looked at Diane's number. My finger hovered over the call button. Then I stopped. I knew calling now would only alert them. And once they knew, they would be gone before I could set a trap. I put the phone down and went out to the balcony to watch the streetlights. The wind was cool, clearing my head. Two impulses fought within me. One wanted to rush out right now, to go to Cicero, to drag that man out into the alley and scream, "Are you done with your act yet?" The other, colder voice was very clear. Asterisk. Do you want to win, or do you just want to vent? Asterisk. I went back inside, washed my face, and tied up my hair. I took a small box from the closet and placed the Cicero note, the strange photocopies, and a printout of the photo from the alley inside it. I locked the box and hid it deep in my wardrobe. Then I did what I had been doing for the past 6 months. I lit a memorial candle. But this time, as the flame caught, I wasn't praying. I watched the smoke curl upwards, and a single phrase my mother-in-law often used came to mind, but now with a new meaning. Asterisk. You reap what you sow. Asterisk. Good things don't just fall from the sky. Sometimes, you have to fight for them, with clarity and with evidence. I placed my hand on the edge of the mantelpiece and whispered to myself, from now on, no one gets to use a fake death to steal my life. After I said it, I turned off the lights and went to the bedroom. I lay down, my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. There were no more tears in my head, only straight lines, timelines, names, and a terrifying calm. I didn't sleep that night, but I didn't fall apart either. I had quietly switched roles, from the woman being led to the woman taking the reins of her own life. After a sleepless night, I still had to go to work. I took a cold shower to wake myself up, tied my hair back neatly, put on a crisp blouse, and looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, and my eyes were dark-ringed, but my gaze was different. It was no longer the look of someone enduring, but of someone holding a ledger, about to audit every single line item. As soon as I got to the office, I sat down, turned on my computer, and started working as usual, but my mind was running on a parallel track. I remembered my colleague's words. It's not about being greedy, it's about your rights. Where were my rights? In that Lincoln Park condo? On which piece of paper? In which signature? Or were they in someone else's pocket? Around noon, my phone rang. It was Diane. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. Her voice was the same as always, sweet and steady. "Maya, honey, make sure you stop by to light a candle for Eleanor later. She hasn't been feeling well." I lowered my voice, making myself sound weak, just the way she wanted. "Okay, Diane. I will." There was a pause, and then, as if she just thought of it, she asked, "Were you out anywhere yesterday?" I called a few times, and couldn't reach you. My heart skipped a beat, but my face remained impassive. I said softly, "I went to the grocery store and came home early. I was so tired I fell asleep." She made a long, soft "oh" sound. It sent a shiver down my spine. She added, with faint concern, "You shouldn't go out so much. It's crowded, and you'll just end up overthinking things." I agreed just to end the call. After hanging up, I realized my back was damp with sweat. Not from fear, but from the understanding that my opponent had started probing. And if she was probing, she would try to silence me, just as she had before. On my way home, I didn't go straight to my apartment. I stopped at a copy shop near the building, printed out the photo from Cicero, and clipped it inside a small notebook. I didn't want the only copy to be on my phone. In this day and age, a lost phone could mean a lost trail. I needed something I could hold in my hand. When I got home, I double-locked the door, drew the curtains, and began to search the condo like an auditor. I didn't tear the place apart like a desperate person. I went through each area methodically: the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, the office. With every drawer I opened, I asked myself, asterisk, did Kevin touch this? Could he have hidden papers here? Asterisk. In the shoe closet, I found an old parking garage pass with a strange name on it, not Kevin's, not mine. The pass was expired, but printed faintly on it were the words Long Bien. My heart pounded on. Long Bien, the original Vietnamese place name from the story that inspired my nightmare. No, that's not right, this is America. The pass said asterisk asterisk Cicero Garage. Dot, dot, asterisk asterisk. It appeared again, not just once. I put the pass in my box of evidence. I went back to the office, opened the safe again, organized the papers, and paused at the insurance folder. I had only a vague knowledge of Kevin's policy. He'd always said he was taking care of our future. I used to feel proud that he was so responsible. Now, I wondered if that pride was just bait. I took out the policy and read every page. This time, I read it with the eyes of an accountant, not a grieving wife. The terms, the benefits, the beneficiaries. I scanned every line. I found a rider stapled in the middle, the paper thinner, the print clear. It was a section on change of beneficiary information and, more importantly, authorization for representative to collect benefits in the event the primary beneficiary is unable to process the claim directly. And the name that appeared there hit me like a slap, asterisk asterisk Diane Vance. Asterisk asterisk, I held my breath. At the bottom of the page were two signatures. One was Kevin's, the other was mine. I stared at my own signature. The penmanship was rushed, shaky, slanted. I remembered it now, a lunch break over a year ago. Diane had stopped by my office with a stack of papers. Maya, can you sign this for me? It's just a confirmation of information for Kevin's big policy. I don't want you to get tangled in red tape later if something happens. I was in the middle of a quarterly report, my mind full of numbers and deadlines. I glanced at it, saw the word confirmation, and signed. I signed it like I signed invoices, never thinking I was signing my life away. I set the writer down on the desk, my hands ice cold. My mind was no longer filled with talk of creating more suffering. There was only one cold, hard thought. Asterisk, I was scammed. Asterisk, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt a wave of anger. But it wasn't hot. It was cold. So cold that I sat perfectly still, opened my phone, and photographed every page of that writer. I saved the photos in 3 places: my phone, an external hard drive, and a draft email. I even photographed the staple and the document serial number. If anyone ever claimed it was a forgery, I would have my proof. I continued to check other documents, receipts, bank statements, messages. I logged into our joint bank account. There were several transfers made in the months before the accident. Small amounts, $3,000, $5,000 with vague descriptions like loan repayment or helping out a friend. I hadn't paid them much mind before, thinking it was related to his projects. But now, they looked like seed money for a plan. I opened his closet and went through the pockets of a heavy winter coat. I found a scrap of paper with a phone number, missing the last digit, as if written in a hurry. Below was the name Rick and a circle drawn around it. I didn't know who Rick was, but I knew my dead husband had not been living a simple life. I sank to the floor, leaning against the closet. The room was silent. I could hear the distant traffic, the hum of the elevator, and suddenly I saw a clear image. Diane at the hospital, at the funeral home, at the mausoleum, always standing in front of me, always blocking the way. I couldn't see my husband's face. I couldn't hold his ashes first. I couldn't keep the documents. I could only sign. I let out a dry laugh. I had never let anyone manage my own salary, yet I had let someone else manage my entire fate. That evening, I went to visit my mother-in-law, just as Diane had suggested. But I went with a new mindset. I brought a fruit basket and a jar of the jam she liked, to keep up appearances. Eleanor was praying her rosary when I arrived. She put it down and took my hand. Have you eaten, dear? I tried to keep my voice soft. Yes, I have. She sighed. You're so thin. Please, Don't dwell on it. I looked at her, and my heart softened. She was so kind. She had no idea her trust was being used as a cover. I wanted to ask her about that night at the hospital, but I stopped myself. Asking now would only hurt her and alert Diane. I didn't have enough evidence to pull her into this yet. I just said, "I'm okay, Eleanor. I'll take care of myself." On the way home, I thought of an old saying my father used to use: "A barking dog never bites." I wasn't going to bark. I was going to bite. But I would bite in the right place, at the right time. Back at the condo, I took out my small notebook and added to the timeline: asterisk date of discovering the insurance rider. People involved. Irregular money transfers. Asterisk. I closed the notebook and locked it in my evidence box. That night, I lit a candle as usual. But as the flame flickered, I no longer prayed for his soul to protect me. I watched the smoke rise, and a single, clear thought formed in my mind. From now on, I would not live on tears. I would live on evidence. The next morning, I went to work as usual. No one knew a cold storm was raging inside me. I still approved invoices, attended meetings, and made polite small talk. But whenever I heard the words life insurance, my heart would give a slight tug, like a taut string inside my chest. At lunch, I told my boss I wasn't feeling well and left an hour early. When I got home, the first thing I did wasn't eat, but open the safe, take out the insurance policy, and lay it on the desk under a bright lamp. I had already seen the rider, already photographed it, but I needed to read it again. Slowly, clearly, like reading a verdict. The rider was thin, the print, neat. The language was polite to assist the family with processing, to streamline procedures. It all sounded so helpful. And that fake helpfulness was the most terrifying thing of all. I read the section: authorized representative to collect benefits. Diane Vance's name was right there, as if it had been placed there from the very beginning. Below it were Kevin's signature and my own. My shaky signature. I looked at it and remembered so clearly. It was a lunch break, over a year ago. I was at my desk, deep in year-end closing, my mind a mess of numbers and deadlines. Diane had shown up in a beige dress, holding a folder. She didn't stay long, just stood by my desk, speaking quickly as if she were in a hurry. "Maya, sign here. It's for Kevin's insurance. I had someone at the company review the information. This just confirms it so there's no hassle later if something happens. You don't want to be running around." I remember I was staring at a spreadsheet while she spoke. "What am I signing?" I'd asked distractedly. She'd smiled. "Just confirming information. I'm looking out for you. It's better for us women to have our paperwork in order." I signed it like I signed a stack of invoices. After I signed, she folded the paper, put it in her purse, and patted my shoulder. "Good girl. Get some rest. Don't work too late." That pat on the shoulder now felt colder than ice. She never gave me a copy, never let me read it properly. And I, out of trust, out of being busy, out of thinking she was family, had signed myself into a trap. I sat there, stunned. For a moment, I wanted to smash the desk, to call Diane and demand to know what she thought I was. But I held back. Anger would only expose my position. I stood up, took a blank sheet of paper, and wrote down a very specific question. Asterisk. Has the insurance money been paid out? If so, where did it go? Who filed the claim? Who received it? Asterisk. I folded the paper and put it in my timeline notebook. Not to forget, but to remind myself to stay focused. Then I did something else. I practiced sounding weak. It felt ridiculous. But this was a war. To win, sometimes you had to play the part your enemy wants you to play, to make them let their guard down. That afternoon, Diane called again. I stared at the screen, took a deep breath, and answered. "Maya, how are you? You sound so weak lately." I sighed, deliberately letting my voice droop. "I'm just tired, Diane. I keep having nightmares." Diane's tone immediately softened. "Of course, you are. It's part of grieving. Don't overthink it. The dead are gone." I didn't argue. I just whispered a yes, like someone on the verge of tears. And just when she thought I was at my lowest, I dropped a line, as if by accident. "Diane, that insurance paperwork for Kevin. I don't understand any of it. If there are any problems later, I'll probably have to ask for your help." There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then she spoke, a little faster than before. "Of course, I can handle that. I know the process." I gripped the phone tightly. Asterisk. I know the process. Asterisk. She said it so naturally, like someone who had done it before. I feigned hesitation. "I'm just afraid I'll mess it up and cause more stress for Eleanor." She replied instantly, "Don't you worry. I'll handle the paperwork. You just need to live with dignity and protect Kevin's honor. And this family's honor." Honor. Again with the honor. A thought flashed in my mind. Asterisk. What honor is there in a fake death? Asterisk. But I swallowed it and just said, "Okay." After hanging up, I stood motionless for a few minutes. I could tell she was confident. Confident because she thought I was still the obedient daughter-in-law, still afraid of gossip, still afraid of upsetting Eleanor, still afraid of getting a bad reputation. And she was right. I was still afraid of hurting Eleanor. But I was no longer afraid of her. That night, I went back through Kevin's bank account. The small, random transfers I'd seen before. I wrote down the dates, amounts, and descriptions. I cross-referenced them with his old work travel schedule. The transfers often happened when he was supposedly away on business. I couldn't be sure of the connection, but I knew it was a thread. I also checked his email on his old laptop, which was still logged in. I wasn't snooping out of curiosity. I was searching for keywords. I typed in insurance, claim, authorization. I found a few confirmation emails that had been forwarded. The dates matched the period when Diane had come to my office. I took screenshots and saved them. The more I looked, the more I felt like I had been played like a pawn on a chessboard, and there was more than one player. Late that night, Eleanor texted me, asking if I was asleep. Her message was simple. Asterisk. Dear, remember to have some soup. I'm worried about you. Asterisk. I read it, and my heart melted. I replied, asterisk. I will, Eleanor. You get some sleep, too. Asterisk. I didn't dare say more. I just promised myself that when I finally uncovered everything, I would do it in a way that would cause her the least amount of pain. Before I went to sleep, I opened my evidence box and placed the insurance rider on top. I looked at my signature one last time and whispered to my reflection, Maya, from now on, you read everything you sign. And you trust. But you always have a way out. People say honesty is the best policy. But I've learned that honesty doesn't mean closing your eyes. I was honest with my eyes closed once, and I paid for it with 6 months of lighting candles for a living man. I turned off the light and lay down. For the first time in a long time, my mind wasn't a fog. It was clear, like an accounting ledger. Debits, credits, signatures, withdrawals. And once the ledger is clear, it's only a matter of time before the books are closed. I went to my mother-in-law's house on an afternoon when the sun was pale and clear. The kind of light that doesn't warm you, but makes you see things more sharply, like the lines of exhaustion on a face. I didn't call ahead. I just brought a bag of fruit, a container of oatmeal I'd made, some fresh spinach, and soft tofu, the things she liked for her vegetarian diet. When she opened the door, the scent of prayer candles wafted out. She was sitting in her old wooden chair, by the small prayer corner, her rosary in hand. At the sound of my voice, she turned. Her eyes lit up for a moment, then immediately clouded with sorrow. Maya, dear. Come in, come in. Don't stand out in the wind. I stepped inside, greeted her, and set down the bags. I looked at her more closely. The circles under her eyes were darker, her cheeks more hollow, her shoulders thinner than a month ago. She was trying to maintain the calm of a devout woman. But grief spares no one, no matter how many rosaries they pray. Have you eaten, Eleanor? I asked, my voice as gentle as I could make it. I have, but just a little. She gave a faint smile, then looked at the groceries. You shouldn't have brought so much. You need to look after yourself. I sat down across from her. A cup of tea on the table had gone cold. I poured her some fresh hot water, my hands busy while my mind weighed every word. I knew the question I was about to ask could push her into an abyss if I wasn't careful. I didn't want to break her. I just needed to know the truth. Did she know? I started with something small. Eleanor, I haven't been sleeping well. I keep thinking about that night at the hospital. The rosary beads in her hand slowed. She sighed, her gaze drifting to the prayer corner. That night, I felt like I had lost my mind. I nodded, then circled closer. That night, did the doctor explain everything clearly? I was so confused, I only caught bits and pieces. She shook her head, her eyes welling up. All I remember is Diane, running back and forth. She told me the doctor said his injuries were too severe, that we shouldn't look. I trusted her. I'm an old woman. My head was in a spin. I took her hand. It was cold, the veins prominent. I took a breath, keeping my voice steady. Eleanor, I have to ask you something. Did you ever think it was strange that I wasn't allowed to see Kevin's face one last time? She blinked, The rosary slipped from her fingers. She quickly snatched it back up, as if afraid of losing her only support. She looked at me, her eyes turning red. You're still thinking about that? I didn't answer right away. I just held her gaze. A guilty person would evade, get defensive, try to change the subject. But Eleanor? Her eyes were filled with fear and pity. Fear that I was hurting. Fear that I was having dark thoughts. Fear of the divine retribution she so deeply believed in. She whispered, I'm so sorry. Dear, I was so afraid you would be traumatized. Diane said the injuries were terrible, that if you saw, how could you go on living? And I was afraid I wouldn't be able to handle it, that I would collapse right there. I heard her, I'm sorry, and my throat tightened. It was clear she wasn't part of the lie. She was just a grieving mother, fed lines by someone else. I pressed on, still circling, but closer. And at the cremation, did you get to see him then? She shook her head, and this time, she started to cry, a choked, stifled sound. No, I didn't see him either. I turned away. I just prayed and prayed so I wouldn't fall apart. I was so weak, Maya. I squeezed her hand. A lock clicked open in my mind. She truly didn't know. She had been herded into a pen of platitudes. Don't cling, don't look, don't ask. And because that pen fit so perfectly with her religious beliefs, she had accepted it without question. I switched to the topic of paperwork, still feigning ignorance. Eleanor, the death certificate, the hospital records, do you have any of them? She wiped her tears, startled. No. Diane said she would keep them all safe so nothing got lost. I don't know anything about that kind of stuff. I was just focused on the prayers. I nodded. That was all I needed. If she were involved, she would have been evasive. But she wasn't. Her focus was exactly where she said it was, on prayers and propriety. And because of that, she had become the perfect, respectable cover for someone else's scheme. I looked around her small house. The kitchen was spotless, a pot of vegetarian soup on the stove, a small vase of lilies by the prayer corner. There was no sign of the extravagance that would come from a large sum of money. The house was the same as always, modest, neat, even a little frugal. I was more certain than ever that she had not benefited from this. She looked at me, her voice trembling. Don't think badly of Diane. She's in pain too, losing her brother. She's been doing so much, she's exhausted. Her words sent a chill through me. Asterisk, she's in pain too. Asterisk, was it real pain or a performance? But I didn't tear down that image in front of her. I just said softly, I understand. I'm not saying anyone is bad. I just want some peace in my own heart, Eleanor. She let out a breath, as if a weight had been lifted. She stood up, went to a closet, and took out a thin scarf. Put this on. The wind is picking up. If you get sick, who will take care of you? I took the scarf and looked at her. Her compassion was real, without calculation. In that moment, I knew one thing for certain. If I acted recklessly, she would be the first one hurt. I couldn't let a good person pay the price for someone else's sins. I helped her in the kitchen, washing spinach, cutting tofu. As we worked, she spoke, as if to comfort herself. God teaches us that life is fleeting. People come and go. We just have to keep our hearts clean. I kept nodding, but in my head, I added my own, much more worldly thought. Asterisk. Some people have prayers on their lips and a knife in their hands. Asterisk, I didn't say it out loud. It would have been an insult to her. But I knew that some people speak of divine justice while counting every dollar. After our meal, she served me a piece of tofu. Eat, dear. You're too thin. I took a small bite, then put down my chopsticks. I said very gently, Eleanor, I promise you I will live with dignity. I won't cause a scene. But will you promise me that if anything happens, you'll be honest with me? She looked at me and nodded immediately, without hesitation. Yes, of course. I just don't want you to suffer. I smiled at her, a smile as thin as paper, but it was enough to reassure her. I stood up to leave. Before I walked out, she took my hand again. Remember, don't let your heart grow dark. You reap what you sow, my dear. I bowed my head. Yes, I remember. Leaving her house, I walked slowly down the stairs. Outside, the pale sun still shone on the leaves. My mind was clearer than ever. I had confirmed one crucial fact. My mother-in-law was not a conspirator. She was a pawn, her trust used as a shield. And by separating the innocent from the guilty, I had also separated a part of the weakness from myself. I was no longer confusing love with blindness. I loved Eleanor, which was why I had to be strong. I got in my car. buckled my seatbelt, and stared straight ahead. My mind was no longer filled with swirling questions, only a quiet, firm decision. From now on, every step I took would be to ensure Eleanor didn't fall. But I would not let anyone else use her as their shield either. I didn't drive straight home. I pulled into a small coffee shop near the lake, choosing a discreet table in the corner, my back to the wall. An old professional habit made me always want to see the door. Today, it felt essential. I opened my phone and looked at the photo from the Cicero alley, then at the name Diane Vance on the insurance rider I had saved. The two pieces of information, side by side, were no longer a shock. They were a picture coming into focus. I knew I had to proceed correctly. I couldn't fumble around in the dark, and I couldn't ask for help from friends. Chicago is a big city, but circles are small. If I asked one person for help today, it could be in Diane's ear by tomorrow. Anyone who could orchestrate a fake death was smart enough to cover their tracks. I needed a professional, someone who operated on facts, not emotions. I searched online for private investigators. Most of the results were generic. I skipped them. I looked for an agency with a physical address, a service contract, and a confidentiality clause. After half an hour, I made a call. A calm, unhurried man's voice answered. Davis speaking. I got straight to the point. I need to meet with you. It's a family matter, but it requires evidence. Not just catching a cheating spouse. There was a pause. Your location. Public place. Good visibility. I suggested a busy diner on a main road, casual enough not to draw attention, bright enough not to feel shady. I arrived 10 minutes early. Mr. Davis arrived on time. He was lean, in a gray button-down shirt, his eyes quick but discreet. He didn't waste time. What do you need? I showed him the photo on my phone. I need you to verify this person's identity. I believe he is my husband, who is, on paper, deceased for 6 months. Mr. Davis looked at the photo without flinching. Do you have any certain identifying marks? I listed them off like I was filing a report. The scar by his left eye, the missing fingertip, his posture. No tears, just facts. Then I showed him the photo of the insurance rider with Diane's name and my signature. He put the phone down. What kind of outcome are you looking for? Evidence for a conversation or for legal action? Legal, I said immediately. I need to know what name he's living under, where he is, who he associates with, and most importantly, where the insurance money went. He nodded. Understood. But this involves official records, which means someone may have helped them. You need to decide how discreet you want this to be. I looked him in the eye. Completely discreet. Don't contact anyone in my social or family circle. I need you to work independently. Mr. Davis made a few notes. I'll need a clearer photo if you have one. The address you tracked him to, the license plate of the motorcycle, if you remember it, and any documents related to the insurance. I'll start by verifying his identity, then follow the money. It's the cleanest way. I let out a breath. I had a folder with me containing printouts of the photo, the insurance rider, and the Cicero address. I hadn't brought the originals. I had learned my lesson about putting all my eggs in one basket. Here's what I have. I need a preliminary report in 10 days. Mr. Davis looked at me. You've been holding this in for a while, haven't you? I gave a bitter smile. I just want to know how I was played. He didn't ask more. Go home and act normal, he said. The more normal you are, the more careless they'll be. When I have information, I'll contact you through a channel of your choice. I chose a new, anonymous email address and arranged to meet in person for the full report. Before we parted, Mr. Davis said something I never forgot. Remember, the most skilled actors are the ones who convince you they're doing it all out of love. I got home as evening was setting in. The condo was silent. I changed, washed my face, and did exactly what a grieving widow was supposed to do. I made a small, simple meal, lit a candle, and tidied the mantelpiece. I kept my breathing even, as if nothing had happened. My phone rang. It was Diane. I watched it ring 3 times before answering, not to be difficult, but to create the impression of a tired, listless person, the exact image she wanted. Maya, were you sleeping? You took a while to answer. I sighed, letting my voice drop. Yes, I just dozed off. She smiled through the phone. See, I told you to get more rest. Oh, and don't forget, we're having dinner at Eleanor's this weekend. She's been asking for you. Okay, I'll be there. There was a pause, then she asked casually, have you been going out much lately? You should avoid crowded places. You don't want to hear people gossiping. I answered truthfully, but a calculated truth. I just go to work and come home. I don't have the heart for anything else. She made a soft hum, then added, and if you need anything with the paperwork, just leave it to me. Don't try to handle it yourself. Those places are a nightmare. I said, okay. After hanging up, I stood staring at the dark screen, a cold feeling spreading through me. She was testing me. She was afraid of me going to those places, which meant she knew that if I went to the right ones, I'd find the truth. That night, I didn't call anyone else. I just opened my timeline notebook and added a new entry, asterisk Diane probing, about my movements, increased vigilance, asterisk. I put the notebook away and locked my evidence box. In the days that followed, I lived a double life. By day, I was the competent accountant, signing documents, attending meetings, sometimes forcing a weary look so my colleagues wouldn't ask too many questions. By night, I was the grieving widow, coming home on time, lighting candles, even posting a bland photo of my soup online, so anyone watching would see exactly what they expected to see. I hated doing it, but I knew this was a game my opponents had set up long ago. I was just changing the way I played. Eleanor called to check on me. Are you sleeping better, dear? I always answered gently. A little better, Eleanor. I didn't want her to worry. If she worried, Diane would know, and everything would get complicated. On the 8th day, Mr. Davis sent a short message to my new email. Asterisk, subject's movements confirmed. Have a name for the intermediary. Asterisk, I read it, and my heart hammered against my ribs. I sat still for several minutes before I could breathe properly. Not out of fear, but because I could feel the truth breaking the surface. I thought of another old saying, greed is a bottomless pit. They were greedy for the insurance money, for a double life, for turning me into a widow. Sooner or later, they would fall into their own pit. On the 10th day, Mr. Davis requested a meeting. I chose a location far from my neighborhood, a coffee shop with private booths. He placed a folder on the table. It wasn't thick, but it was heavy enough to make my hands feel cold. Here's what I have, he said. The man you saw isn't using his real name. In that neighborhood, they call him by another name. And there's a guy behind the scenes, a fixer who handles the paperwork. They call him Slick Rick. I heard the name Slick Rick, and a chill went down my spine. It matched the name on the scrap of paper I'd found. Rick in a circle. It wasn't a coincidence. Mr. Davis continued, his voice even. I haven't dug into the hospital yet, but the death certificate was processed suspiciously fast. The insurance money is being funneled through an intermediary account and withdrawn in small cash increments. I gripped my purse, my nails digging into the leather, but I felt no pain. I asked, my voice low, whose name is on the intermediary account? Mr. Davis showed me a printout with a name and account number. Probably not the real owner, could be a mule. But if we follow it, we'll find the person pulling the strings. I stared at the name for a long time. There was no more room for hope that I had been mistaken. There was only the brutal truth. They had set up the financial pipeline before I even knew I was going to be a widow. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I just said one thing, like closing a ledger. Continue. I need a case so solid that when I make my move, they can't get back up. Mr. Davis nodded. Understood. But remember, the closer you get to the truth, the more they might lash out. Be careful. I put the folder in my bag. Before leaving, I caught my reflection in a mirror in the hallway. My eyes were completely different from 6 months ago. They were no longer the eyes of a woman waiting for others to make decisions for her. They were the eyes of someone holding the end of a thread, about to unravel the whole thing. I stepped out onto the street. The wind was strong. I pulled my collar up, not because I was cold, but because I knew that from now on, every step had to be certain. One misstep, and the actors would have time to clear the stage. But I had come this far. I wasn't going to turn back. I got home after dark. The cold, white light of the apartment hallway illuminated the exhaustion on my face. I went inside, double-locked the door, and leaned against it for a moment. Not to cry, but to let my heart rate return to normal. I placed the folder from Mr. Davis on the dining table. Under the warm yellow light, it didn't look thick, but to me, it felt as heavy as a tombstone. I made a cup of hot water, took a sip, and then opened it, as if I needed to steady myself before touching the most important thing in the world. Inside were photos of the man from the supermarket, going in and out of the Cicero house. A photo of him fixing his motorcycle. A photo of him buying groceries at a corner store. A photo of him carrying the little boy to school. It was all so normal it was humiliating. Humiliating not because he was alive, but because I had lit candles for him while he was living a perfectly comfortable life. There was a log of his movements. What time he left. What time he came back. I looked at the schedule and felt a chill. It was as regular as a clock. This double life wasn't a recent development. It was a routine. The most important part was the financial trail. Mr. Davis had printed out bank records of small cash withdrawals, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 from different ATMs. Not one lump sum, but a slow drain. It was like someone breaking a large rock into small pieces to hide in their pockets, so no one would see the bulge. I cross-referenced the dates with my own timeline. The withdrawals coincided with the days Diane had called to remind me to go to church, to observe a memorial, to not overthink things. I let out a bitter laugh. While I was practicing being a good, grieving widow, they were practicing how to launder money. In the investigator's notes, the name Slick Rick appeared several times. Mr. Davis had noted that Rick was a known fixer who had been seen with Diane on a few occasions near government buildings. There was a long-distance photo of a man in his 40s, with a slight paunch and a buzz cut, standing outside a coffee shop near the hospital, talking to a woman who looked like Diane. The photo wasn't perfectly clear, but the posture and the coat were a match. And most importantly, the date was right after the accident. I closed the folder and rested my hand on it, as if closing the lid on the coffin of their lies. But I didn't let myself act yet. I knew that having evidence wasn't enough. I had to use it correctly. If I acted on impulse, it would just turn into a shouting match. They would play the victim, use Eleanor as a shield, and I would be painted as the widow who had lost her mind from grief. My first step was to back everything up. I scanned the entire folder, saved it to my computer with a password, and made copies on an external hard drive, in a draft email, and on a new, secure cloud account created solely for this purpose. I even took photos of each page with my phone and saved them in a private chat with myself. Only then did I breathe. People who are good at creating lies are also good at destroying evidence. I wasn't going to give them the chance. When I was done, I sat down and pulled up a name Mr. Davis had recommended, a lawyer named Miss Harmon. He had said she was tough, meticulous, and not impulsive. I dialed her number. A clear, no-nonsense female voice answered. Harmon. I was direct. My name is Maya Lin. I need a consultation regarding a case of document fraud and insurance. My husband is legally dead, but I have evidence that he's alive. There was a pause. What kind of evidence do you have? I listed it off like an auditor. Photographs, documents, a timeline, a witness. I have an in-person sighting, a P.I. report on his movements and the financial trail, an insurance rider with my forged signature, and the name of the fixer. I need to proceed correctly to protect my rights and avoid a counterattack. Miss. Harmon's voice was sharp. Good. Bring everything to my office tomorrow. I'll review it and then we'll decide what to file and what to hold back. You need to understand, this isn't just about betrayal. This is felony insurance fraud and forgery. If we follow the right procedures, they won't be able to spin it. I scheduled a meeting for the next morning. After hanging up, I realized my hands were still cold. But it was no longer the cold of despair. It was the cold of someone holding a scalpel, knowing exactly where to make the cut. The next morning, I took a half-day off from work, citing a family emergency. I dressed simply, with no makeup. I didn't want anyone to remember my face in these sensitive places. The law office was in a downtown building. The atmosphere was sterile and professional. Miss Harmon came out to greet me. She was a bit shorter than me, with a sharp haircut and eyes that looked right through you. She didn't ask about my feelings. Tell me everything. Chronologically, she said. I laid out my timeline and narrated the events, from the midnight call about the accident to the signing of the papers to my discovery. I showed her the insurance rider, the P.I. report, pointing out Slick Rick's name and the withdrawal dates that matched Diane's calls. She didn't jump to conclusions. She just underlined, made notes, and reviewed the documents like an auditor examining a high-risk project. When she was done, she put her pen down and looked at me. Maya, I'll be blunt. If this is all true, this isn't a family drama. This is a criminal conspiracy to defraud an insurance company. To win, we need to make them either confess or get tangled in their own paper trail. The photos and the P.I. report are a great start, but the key will be their statements and the official procedures. I asked calmly, what's my first step? Miss Harmon said, I don't advise you to go and confront them. They will immediately frame you as an unstable, grieving widow. We need to create a situation where the person in charge, your sister-in-law, says something incriminating, something she thinks is safe to say. People who manipulate paperwork often get cocky about knowing the process. One slip of the tongue is all we need. I got goosebumps. It was true. Diane had told me she knew the process. I just needed to get it on tape. In context. Miss Harmon added one more crucial point. And your mother-in-law. If she is innocent, we must keep her out of the line of fire until the last possible moment. They will use her as a moral shield. And when morality is pitted against the law, the soft-hearted often lose. I nodded. I knew she was right. Before I left, Miss Harmon said one last thing, her voice low but heavy. Maya, I don't need you to be an aggressor. I just need you to be smart. There's a saying, sow the wind, reap the whirlwind. It sounds like they've sown a hurricane. I walked out of her office, holding my folder. The sun was bright. The traffic was heavy. People were rushing about their lives. I stood on the sidewalk, took a deep breath, and felt a clear path forward. I no longer cared why times they did it. I just wanted to make sure they paid the right price with the law, with evidence, with the truth, not with a messy fight that everyone would forget. I went back to my condo and lit a candle as usual. But this time, as the flame rose, I didn't see myself as the abandoned woman. I saw myself as the chief accountant, about to close the books on a debt that someone else thought would never be collected. I chose the day of the 6-month memorial, according to the lunar calendar. Everything had to be just right, so they wouldn't suspect a thing. I wasn't planning an elaborate affair, just something proper and respectful. As my grandmother used to say, even in poverty, be clean. Even in rags, be dignified. I was going to let them appear dignified in front of the world, just before I stripped it all away. That morning, I woke up early. I went to the local market and bought fresh fish, pork belly, spinach, bananas, a grapefruit, and a bouquet of lilies. It had to be lilies. Eleanor loved them, and Diane always commented on how elegant they were. I also bought tofu and mushrooms to prepare a separate vegetarian meal for my mother-in-law. Back home, I cleaned everything. I polished the mantelpiece and straightened the memorial photo. I lit an early candle before I started cooking. The smell of braised fish filled the air. The spinach soup simmered. I made the tofu and mushrooms for Eleanor. Mild. Just how she liked it. I deliberately made everything perfect so no one could find fault. While I was cooking, I set up the most important part. I took out a small audio recorder. The kind Miss Harmon had recommended, simple, one-button operation. With a battery that would last for hours. I hid it in the vase of lilies, tucking it between the stems, close to the glass, where it was obscured by the leaves. I stepped back and looked at the dining table and the memorial setup. Nothing looked out of place. It was the perfect picture of a family, of a daughter-in-law trying to keep things proper. Just before noon, I called Eleanor first. Eleanor, I'm coming to pick you up. I've made a small meal for Kevin's 6-month memorial. Please come, so we can do it properly. Her voice was happy, but tinged with sadness. Of course, dear. I'll be ready. I miss him so. Then I called Diane, my voice soft and a little shaky, as if I'd been crying. Diane, I'm making a memorial meal today. Could you and Eleanor please come? I want to do it right. Diane answered quickly. Of course, I'll be there. Don't make too much of a fuss. You need to save your money. I whispered. I know. It's just something simple. Around 1 p.m., I brought Eleanor to my condo. She walked in, looked at the memorial, at the vase of lilies, and clasped her hands in prayer. She turned to me, her voice hoarse. You've done so much, dear. If Kevin knew, he would be so proud of you. I lowered my head, a pang of guilt and sorrow hitting me. I took her hand and led her to a chair at the dining table, with her vegetarian meal set before her. I poured her some tea. At 1:30, Diane arrived. She swept in, her eyes scanning the room quickly, the way a realtor inspects a property. Then, she smiled. Oh, Maya, you shouldn't have gone to all this trouble. You're young. You need to think about your own future. I gave a weak smile, playing my part. I did it for Eleanor, and for Kevin to be at peace. Diane nodded sagely. Yes, that's the right way to think. The departed must be at peace. If you keep dwelling on things, you'll only make yourself miserable. I didn't argue. I invited her to sit. I had deliberately arranged the seating so Diane was closest to the vase of lilies at the head of the table. Eleanor sat across from me, slightly to the side, out of the direct line of the conversation I was about to start. When the candle had burned halfway down, I invited them to eat. I served Eleanor some mushrooms, asking if the taste was right. She nodded, her eyes still red. Diane helped herself to the fish, complimenting it. "This is delicious. You really know how to cook." I replied. "Kevin, he used to love this dish." I let the sentence hang, allowing the mood to drop. Diane looked at me, her voice consoling. "Don't bring it up. It only makes it hurt more." I nodded, took a deep breath, and cast my line, just as the lawyer had instructed. Weak, scared, and looking for help. "Diane, to be honest, I'm so tired. I'm terrified of all the paperwork, the house, the insurance. I don't know what to do. I was hoping you could handle all of it for me. I'll sign whatever you need me to, as long as Eleanor doesn't have to worry." I said it slowly, like a desperate person clinging to a lifeline. Eleanor, hearing "doesn't have to worry," immediately looked at Diane with pleading eyes. Diane saw her opening. A flicker of triumph lit up her face. She put down her chopsticks, her tone shifting from comforting sister to efficient manager. "Of course. I'll take care of it. I'm used to this kind of thing. I'll get it all done quickly and cleanly." I lowered my head, pretending to wipe away a tear. You can really do it?" "I'm so afraid of going to those offices, of them asking questions I can't answer." Diane gave a small, self-satisfied smile. "Oh, please. There's a process for everything. I've handled plenty of these things. It's always cleaner when you have someone who knows how to handle the paperwork." I looked up, my eyes red, playing the naive widow. "Someone who knows how? What do you mean?" Diane faltered for a second, but had already gone too far. She glanced at Eleanor, then said quickly, "I just mean it's faster when you know someone who's an expert. If you go by yourself, it takes forever." I nodded, maintaining my innocent act. "Is it the person you mentioned before? The one who helps you?" Diane's brow furrowed slightly, then she waved it off. "Why are you so concerned with the details?" "Yes, it's a guy named Rick. People call him Slick Rick. He's a professional fixer. I use him to speed things up. That's all." Slick Rick. She had said his name. I heard it as clearly as a stamp hitting a document. All the threads in my mind snapped into place. I couldn't let my excitement show. I just made a small "oh" sound and feigned fear. "So, this Rick can handle everything?" I get so nervous around sensitive paperwork. Diane waved her hand dismissively. "Don't be. When you hire someone, you let them do their job. Listen to me. As women, we shouldn't make our lives harder than they need to be. Anything that can be done cleanly should be." The word cleanly made me think of the hospital, the cremation, the columbarium. Cleanly was the key. They wanted it clean, so no one had time to look closely. Eleanor interjected, her voice weak. "As long as it's not against God's law, as long as it doesn't create more suffering." Diane turned to her, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Don't worry, Mom. Everything I do it with you in mind. I'm just trying to make sure Kevin is at peace." I watched her say it, and my blood ran cold. She spoke as smoothly as if she were reciting a prayer. I finally understood the meaning of prayers on the lips, a knife in the hand. I pushed one more time, to get her to confirm her role. "That night at the hospital, you handled the procedures so fast. I was a mess. All I knew how to do was sign." Diane immediately took the bait. "Yes. You have to be fast in those situations. Any delay just creates chaos." And it helped that Rick was there to assist with some of the papers. That's why I went so cleanly. After saying it, she seemed to realize she had said too much. She quickly took another bite of fish and smiled. "Enough of this sad talk. Let's eat." I lowered my head and served Eleanor some more tofu. My hands were steady, but my heart was racing. In the vase of lilies, the small recorder was silently capturing the confession that would bring them down. The meal ended normally. I walked Diane to the door. She turned back and said, "Remember to get some rest, Maya. If you need anything, I'll take care of it." I gave a faint nod. As soon as she was gone, I went back inside. Eleanor was sipping her tea, looking exhausted. I sat down beside her. "Eleanor, let me take you home. You need a rest." She gripped my hand. "You're a good girl, Maya. I love you." I smiled at her, but in my heart, I had made a decision. From now on, Eleanor would no longer be Diane's shield. After dropping her off, I returned to my condo, locked the door, and went straight to the vase of lilies. I retrieved the recorder, my hand surprisingly steady. I plugged it into my laptop, copied the file, and immediately made 3 backups, labeled with the date and time. Listening to it the first time, I still felt a chill run down my spine as I heard Diane's clear voice say, Slick Rick, assist with some of the papers. That's why it went so cleanly. I sat there, not smiling, not crying, just feeling like someone who had finally found the key to a lock. Now that I had the key, I just had to follow the final steps the lawyer had laid out. I opened my phone and texted Miss Harmon one sentence. I have the recording. Diane named Slick Rick and admitted to using an assistant to make the paperwork clean. After sending it, I turned off the screen and looked out the window. The Chicago night was surprisingly clear, the streetlights golden, the air cool. I remembered a line from a poem. The mills of God grind slowly, yet they grind exceeding small. They had taken my dignity, my money, and 6 months of my life. It was time to collect the debt. Not with curses, but with the truth. After texting my lawyer, I didn't call anyone else. I did one thing. I turned off all the unnecessary lights, closed the door to the office, opened my laptop, and composed an email. I attached the audio file, the photo from Cicero, the insurance rider, my timeline, and the bank records of the withdrawals. I labeled each attachment like an audit file. Source, date, content, relevance. Only then did I allow myself to sit back. I thought I would be shaking, but I wasn't. I was perfectly calm. Perhaps because I had spent the last 6 months shaking, and there was nothing left to shake. The next morning, Miss Harmon called back, her voice decisive. Maya, the recording is excellent. Now, we move to the next step. We file a formal complaint with the authorities and the insurance company's fraud unit, with all your evidence attached. You are not to confront them directly. Once the investigation begins, they will expose themselves. Just prepare yourself, their reaction will be fierce. I said, I understand. I knew what fierce meant. People who could fake a death could also fake tears. They could invent a story about me going mad with grief. But they had forgotten one thing. I had evidence, and I was following the law. That afternoon, my lawyer confirmed the complaint had been filed. I didn't ask for details. I just asked one important question. What do I do now? Miss Harmon's reply was simple. Live normally. The more normal, the better. And stay safe. If you notice anything unusual, call me. That evening, Diane called. I looked at the screen, my heart calm. Maya, what have you been doing? I couldn't reach you all day. Her voice was sharp, thinly veiled with concern. I sighed, my voice weak. I was so tired, Diane. I fell asleep. There was a pause. Are you free tomorrow? I need to talk to you about those papers you asked me to handle. I knew she was sniffing around. I said softly, I'm going to have dinner at Eleanor's tomorrow. We can talk then. She agreed, but her okay was no longer gentle. I could hear the anxiety in her breath. Before hanging up, she added one last thing. Maya, seriously, don't listen to anyone's bad advice. People say crazy things when someone is in mourning. I just replied, I know. After the call, I stood on the balcony, looking down at the street. The cars kept moving, people kept living. And I was standing on the verge of a truth that was about to erupt like a broken dam. 2 days later, it happened. Around noon, Eleanor called me, her voice filled with panic. Maya, Diane just called. She said she has to go and meet with some people, that they've invited her to talk. Do you know what's going on? My hand tightened on the phone. I didn't want to hurt her, but she was already in the middle of it. I kept my voice as gentle as possible. Eleanor, please, just eat and rest. I'll be over this afternoon. We'll talk then. When I arrived at her house, she was sitting in her chair, the rosary in her hands, but her fingers weren't moving. Her eyes were red, her lips pressed together, as if she were trying to pray, but the words wouldn't come. I sat beside her, took her hands, and spoke slowly, not beating around the bush, but not being brutal either. Eleanor, I need you to be calm. I saw Kevin. Her eyes flew open. The rosary fell to the floor with a clatter. She gasped. What did you say? I took out my phone and opened the photo from Cicero. I didn't shove it in her face. I let her look at it slowly, giving her heart a chance to catch up. She stared for a few seconds, her face turning ashen. She grabbed my arm. No, it can't be. I whispered. I didn't want to believe it either. But I followed him. I have proof. Eleanor, they used you. I'm so sorry I have to be the one to tell you. She was shaking uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face. She didn't scream. She just kept shaking her head, like someone who had just been pushed off a cliff. Just then, the doorbell rang. Diane burst in, her face tense, her eyes sharp. Seeing me there, she froze for a second, then immediately changed her tone. Maya, what are you doing here? Mom is unwell. You shouldn't be bothering her. I stood up, my voice even. Diane, stop acting. She was stunned. Eleanor looked at her, her lips trembling. Diane, tell me, Kevin, is he? Diane rushed toward her. Mom, calm down. Don't believe a word she says. Maya is in shock. She's imagining things. I opened my phone and played the audio file. Diane's voice filled the living room, clear and damning. Asterisk Slick Rick. Assist with some of the papers. That's why it went so cleanly. Asterisk Diane's face went white. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Eleanor stared at her, as if she were a stranger, her eyes filled with a pain that was beyond tears. At that moment, Diane's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and quickly silenced it. But in that split second, I saw the caller ID, unknown number, and it was the third call in a row. She turned to me, her voice a low snarl. You've gone too far, Maya. Do you think this is clever? I looked her straight in the eye. I'm just giving the truth back its voice. Before she could respond, there was a loud knock at the door. Two plainclothes officers presented their credentials and asked Diane to come with them for questioning. I didn't need to know who they were. I just knew the process had begun. Diane whipped around to face her mother. Mom, tell them, everything I did for you. Eleanor shot to her feet, her voice hoarse but as strong as steel. You did this for me? You faked your brother's death for me? You made his wife mourn a living man for me? Diane stood frozen. As they led her away, she looked back at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and fear. I didn't look away. I had once been afraid of what people thought. I was no longer afraid of the gaze of a liar. 3 days later, Miss Harmon texted. They had brought in the man living under an assumed name and were verifying his identity. I read the message, my heart turning to ice, not from pain, but from the knowledge that the final act had begun. For the confrontation in Cicero, I brought Eleanor with me. She needed to see it with her own eyes to truly be free. She sat in the car, clutching her rosary, but not praying, her eyes fixed on the street outside. I didn't say much. Some pain is only made worse by words. When we got to the alley, she got out of the car. Her legs were weak, but she walked forward. The door to the small house opened, and there he was. The same stooped posture, the same scar, the same missing fingertip. The only difference was that now, there was nowhere left to run. Eleanor looked at him, not with tears, but with a profound emptiness. The rosary fell from her hands again. Her voice was like the wind. Kevin, are you even human? He turned pale, stammering. Mom, I was forced to do it. I let out a soft, bitter laugh. Forced? You look pretty happy, being forced. Forced to have children who call you Daddy? The woman from inside the house stood in the doorway, clutching her children, her face white. The two little ones looked back and forth, not understanding anything, only sensing the storm in the air. I looked at them and felt a pang of pity, but I felt even less pity for the man who had created this storm in my life. Eleanor looked at her son, her voice low and heavy. God does not teach us to deceive. You lied to your wife. You lied to your mother. Did you think you would get away with it? He collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face. But I no longer believed his tears. I had cried real tears for him. His were just the tears of a man who had run out of road. From that day on, the story was no longer about platitudes or propriety. It was about documents, signatures, bank transfers, and consequences. Slick Rick was brought in. The insurance policy was audited. The intermediary account was frozen. And Diane, the woman who had stood at a funeral looking like a pillar of strength, now had to answer the questions. Who was the director? Who benefited? Who forged? Who paid for the silence? As for me, I cleared the memorial from my mantelpiece in the Lincoln Park condo. I didn't do it with hatred. I did it like an accountant closing a bad account. I kept one wedding photo, not to remember the love, but to remind myself of how deeply I had once trusted and how clearly I had to see from now on. I told Eleanor one last thing, my voice soft but clear. I'm not destroying your faith, Eleanor. I'm just restoring the truth. so no one can use the name of God to cover up their sins anymore. She looked at me, tears falling, and nodded. This time, her tears were real, and I no longer had to swallow my own grief to maintain appearances. In life, there are lessons no one wants to learn. But once you learn them, you will never be so easily led again. To all of you who have read this far, I hope you remember this. Trusting people is good, but blind trust is a tragedy. Keeping up appearances has its place, but not at the cost of your own rights. If you found this story compelling and thought-provoking, please leave a like for our channel.